Ancient Chinese Secret.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, I'm a little bit upset this morning.
I know why, because it's an ancient Chinese secret.
What
are you upset about this morning, Brad? What kind of burr is under your saddle?
I'm down to my last box of Little Debbie's fall party cakes. I'm going like...
Oh, no, Brad. What are you going to do?
Oh, man, I don't know. By the way, I have some good news. We are now an official morning radio show because I have a new addition to the studio, John.
What do you have?
John, you can't be a morning show without this. You ready?
I'm ready.
You hear that, John?
That's not your Salvation Army bell. What kind of bell is that?
It's one of those bells that sits on the countertop when you go up to a place where there's nobody at the counter and you click on the bell, you hit the bell. It's one like the bell's got like the button on the top. And this is like an official morning show. If you're like, Howard Stern or like even afternoon show like Mark Reardon, you have to have this bell. So when somebody says something that's really interesting or really sort of like, a zinger, you hit. And if it's a real zinger, you go. Like that kind of stuff.
Wow, very good, Brad. And I think all the dogs that are riding around in a car would probably freak out. They would think it's a doorbell, and they would start barking. We're going to set off a chain of events here.
And speaking of dogs, that's in my top 3 this morning. And
Brad, I told you not to talk about your wife on the air. You do it all the time, Brad.
First off, I'm not married, but this is actually a
I know. I didn't want to say X. I didn't know if you've ever talked about that. Go ahead.
This is a story that will make pet lovers cringe. And to a certain extent, it's big in California, and it's a big problem in Japan, and it's getting to be a problem in Missouri. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Wow. It's not hard to be big in Japan, Brad.
John texts me this morning. John never usually texts me. And John says, hey, Brad, can you play
Ancient Chinese Secret?
And I said, John, I'm not going to play
Ancient Chinese Secret.
And I would say, John, why do you want me to play
Ancient Chinese Secret?
Why is that, John?
I guess we'll probably find out in the top 3. I think you were about to get that intro started.
Oh, John Combest, Combest, every single day of his life, he puts together this incredible list of all the important stuff you should know going on in the state of Missouri. Sometimes it's 30, 40, 50 different things. It's like the Drudge Report of Missouri, johncombest.com. But what we do is we start the show off with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he counts them down because John gives us his top 3, and we start with...
In third place...
2 of our 3 stories today in the top 3 are kind of in our backyard stories. Maybe Brad Hildebrand would say one of them is a not in my backyard story, but one of them is a backyard story. The first one is brought to us by the Washington Missourian. They have a really good reporter there named Chris Parker. And Chris has covered the DNR agency, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and kind of the hot potato of the landfill issue. You and I discussed this issue months and months ago. And in fact, we got a comment on our YouTube page, which is a popular place for people to listen to our show again and again after you've already heard it. And Jim Roberts, a gentleman who's a property owner next to the site of an abandoned landfill, commented. And Brad, you got to interact with him a little bit and go back and forth. And I know for timing issues, it's been hard. It's been a challenge to get him on the show. We're not one of those generic interview shows, but I know that you have spoken with him. Here's what Chris Parker, the Missourian, brings up today. Here's his lead. A former inspector for the Missouri Department of Natural Resources said an abandoned landfill in rural Franklin County is the most extreme example in this region, if not the whole state, of a worsening environmental problem for Missouri. He goes on to detail the fact that a woman named Teresa Taveri, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's Thevary. Teresa Taveri worked for 10 years in the solid waste division of DNR St. Louis Regional Office. Excuse me. She conducted 2 inspections of the Franklin County landfill in 2022 and 2025. At DNR, that's known as the Generally Hauling Landfill, and it has been abandoned since the 1990s. So Ms. Taveri says personally and professionally, I would say that generally hauling is the worst and most egregious out of all our closed and inactive landfills in the St. Louis region, and quite possibly the whole state, although I haven't seen nearly any of the other regions to back that up. So in other words, she's saying this is the worst she's ever seen. She doesn't have a lot to compare it to the rest of the state. Now, there were a couple curious nuggets that Chris Parker unveiled here. They were things I didn't know, and I've read a lot of coverage about this. Today, there is a state law that says that before DNR can essentially license or give the go-ahead to a landfill, DNR has to say, yes, there is a plan to close this landfill eventually. So in other words, you can't go to DNR and say, hey, we want to start a landfill without showing them, hey, we have a plan for what happens when we close the landfill. But that law that exists today did not exist even back in the 1990s when the Zyken family owned the landfill and then abandoned the landfill and didn't pay for cleanup. So Mr. Roberts is the landowner who noticed green soil on his property coming from a stream or a creek. Mr. Roberts has pointed out many times that these different government agencies put their hands up and say, we would love to help you, but we are not equipped to help you, and it's not in our scope to help you. And one more nugget I'll point out here, Brad, before we discuss this, is that State Senator Ben Brown, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, had a series of community forums, you could say kind of a listening tour in his district throughout several counties. And at the Franklin County meeting, both Mr. Roberts and someone else came to speak about the landfill issue and talk about the challenges that they were having in dealing with the cleanup, remediation, et cetera. Ben Brown, for his part, says he's engaging state and federal officials on the topic. So this is really what the definition of constituent service is. One of your constituents has an issue, and you try to help them navigate as best you can the federal, state, local bureaucracy here. So, Brad, the saga continues for Mr. Roberts, and this appears to be, DNR did a good job here, I think, of explaining their position, which is that we don't have, DNR would tell you, look, we don't have any jurisdiction here. We don't have the resources to come in and fix this. And it kind of isn't their problem, according to them.
This is the problem with government, and to the point where it reminds me of three of my family members at one point in time worked at Nordstrom. Can I give you the analogy why this is a problem?
Absolutely, Brad. Because what did Nordstrom say when people would come in with any sort of an issue?
Well, this was not necessarily an issue, but let's say one of my family members worked in the cosmetic department. And let's say a guy came over, or just like a woman would come over to her and say, hey, I need to buy a bra for my wife. Where's the bra department? Okay. In almost other stores, they'd say, it's back in the corner, go down this aisle and make a right. Okay. But in Nordstrom, what they would do was they would say, you know what? That's not my department, but I'll be more than happy to walk you over to that department, and I will personally introduce you to one of the women in the lingerie department. Get what I'm saying, John?
I get what you're saying, and that reduces the amount of drop-off. Now, a capitalist entity, like a company, has a financial incentive, because if you just point them that direction, they might remember that little Billy has to go pee, or that they need to check their phone for something. And in a company, you want to walk them over there because you don't want to lose the sale. But in government, which is theoretically not for profit, you don't have any incentive in using more of your time to help somebody find a solution.
In other words, they don't give a poop. They're doing their job.
Well, I wouldn't use potty mouth language on the air, Brad. But yeah, I get exactly what you're saying.
Isn't it sort of like, hey, man, not my problem? Isn't that sort of what the government is saying with this? Hey, man.
I think so, but hold on. Let me interrupt, Brad. If I'm at DNR and I look at the letter of the law and I say I have no jurisdiction, and it's not my space to come in and tell Franklin County, hey, Dave Schatz and others, you guys need to fix this mess. I think they're probably trying to respect the local government too, Brad. I mean, it's easy, I think, to villainize DNR here, but DNR's hands are probably legally tied. And can you imagine going to an attorney at DNR if you represent this region, let's say. Can you imagine going to an attorney and be like, hey, yeah, I just told Franklin County they needed to get their act together, and I sent a crew out there, and they're going to start working. Can you imagine the litigious rainstorm, hellstorm that would rain down?
Well, John, let me tell you a story. You know, you make fun of me for driving to Jefferson City all the time to renew my driver's license and get my license plates. One day I was on the way to Jefferson City, and I was going I'd gotten off at Kingdom City. I'm about halfway between 70 and Jeff City on 54, and I see this lady pulled over to the side of the road, and she's got a flat tire. So I have my impact wrench and my floor jack in the back of my car. Carry that with me all the time. So I pulled over and I said, ma'am, your tire's flat. She says, I don't know how to change it, and I don't even know how to get the spare tire out of the back. And I go, no problem. And I start to get my tools on my car, and I go, you heading to Jeff City? Yes, I work at the DNR. I go, ma'am, I can't help you. And I got in my car and left.
And then she called the police and said there's a man jacking on the shoulder.
Right. Okay. We done with that one?
Yeah, let's go to number 2, Brad.
Up a notch to number 2.
For the second day in a row, I'll reference the F-150 campaign tour, which had made a stop in beautiful St. Peter's. Now, I believe Scott Fawn recorded this last week based on context clue and based on my observational skills. There was a lot of snow in the background, which leads me to believe that Scott filmed this actually last week. He had Wendy Hausman, a state representative from the St. Peter's area, on the show. They did a little Christmas update. They talked mostly, they talked mostly about Christmas time issues and things that are going on in their lives. And, you know, it was kind of a joyous get together. But of course, they also talked about legislation. And one of Wendy Hausman's pet issues had been stopping sex trafficking, you know, finding a way to make that prevention system a little bit stronger. But she also mentioned what she called, quote, common sense legislation, end quote, around AI and artificial intelligence. Now, Scott and Wendy didn't have a lot of time on this particular F-150 conversation to go deep into that issue. But I would point people to Missouri Times coverage from Jake Kroesen about an AWS, Amazon Web Services, facility that AWS is trying to build in Montgomery County. Now, Brad, that's just outside our coverage area, correct?
Yes.
Just a little bit to the west of us. But, you know, we broadcast into Warren County, so kind of neighbors there. And it would appear as though, if you read the story that Jake put together, and I would like to say that Jake, if you read his data center stories, is probably becoming the most prolific and in-depth reporter when it comes to data centers. Jake does a great job with this stuff. If you read the AWS story, it would appear that AWS is going about this the right way in terms of data centers. And by that, I mean that we've seen other data centers, for example, St. Charles County being killed, and in other regions in the St. Louis area, projects being killed because there was so much secrecy around them. Ooh, is it Google? Nobody's saying. Is it Facebook? Nobody's saying. AWS appears to be transparent, going to these county leaders, talking about what the revenue would mean for their schools, for the infrastructure, for citizens, and not trying to hide their projects. And they're doing it with a series of public meetings. They appear to be getting out in front of these issues early and having big, open discussions about them. So I would point to Jake's coverage here. Scott Fawn actually had a piece about it last week, I believe. And it looks like AWS is going about it in a really thoughtful and methodical way.
John, that data center out in Warren County is actually being put up by us. I know you won't admit that. So people are streaming our show, and they're streaming it so much that we have to have a new data center out there in Warren County. And by the way, did you know the F-150 tour that Scott Fawn did a great job? And he had, was it Nick Schroyer, a.k.a. Ricky Schroeder? I thought it was really good that he congratulated Nick for getting the Ketanji Brown Jackson, or Ketanji. What's her name? Ketanji.
It's Jumanji. She was actually named after a Disney movie.
Well, he got that award from Ketanji Brown Jackson. Oh yeah,
I see. That's a little Scalia throwback. I'll tell you who's not getting one. The nation of China. Can we get to story number 1?
Hold it. Before we do that, I have to do this. Okay.
Ancient Chinese secret.
The number 1.
Boom. Do, 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 do. Oh, People's Republic of China, you hear the bell ring? That means it's time for little ones to go to school. What a timely bell you have there, Brad. Attorney General Catherine Hanaway said yesterday that China is now suing Missouri in China in the wake of the $24 billion American court judgment the state has obtained against China in connection with the pandemic. I should note that that language is brought to us by the Post-Dispatch's Mark Schlinkman, the Schlinkmeister General. Brad, the People's Republic of China is quite mad, very mad, at Eric Schmitt, at Andrew Bailey, at Catherine Hanaway now, because the state of Missouri has been disparaging the good name, I can't even say this with a straight face, has been disparaging the good name of China. Missouri's lawsuits and their legal machinations have caused a, quote, reputational threat, end of quote, to China. So, Brad, if you recall correctly, China unleashes a virus on the world. The state of Missouri says we're going to hold China accountable. A court agrees, and China says, oh, no, and countersues, and actually wants, let me check the number here, $50 billion? $51 billion and an apology. And I think they should start with Eric Schmitt. I think Eric Schmitt should be the first one to apologize. And I was outraged when I saw on Fox News, Eric Schmitt says he has no plans to apologize to the People's Republic of China. Brad, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know why us Americans can't just say we're sorry to China. We should have been better sports about the China virus, the Wuhan virus, and I think we should just drop all legal claims against them.
You know, the interesting thing about that is there's part of the story you don't realize. You mentioned 3 different attorney generals, but the 4th attorney general you didn't mention is also in trouble with China. Do you know this story?
Oh, no. Is it, you mean Josh Hawley?
Yes. Timu called.
What happened?
Timu called and they want their tight pants back. That's what they do.
Oh, and pirate boots. I heard that on the Brad and Shelley show many years ago.
God. In C block, no, actually in B block, we're going to talk about, because I did some radio listening yesterday. Okay. And my new motto is, one of my new things is, I'm always trying to compliment people. Okay. It gets me in trouble sometimes. Sometimes they'll go like, why are you complimenting me?
You tell a woman that she looks like she has nice lungs. What are you going to compliment another radio station on, Brad?
That's only if I see her x-rays, if I see the nice lungs.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
I'm going to compliment 93.3, and part of my top 3 is going to be what I listened to yesterday on Rick and Tracy's station, 93.3. Okay, so we'll pick that up in the B block, okay?
Yeah, we should. And, Brett, while we're talking about 93.3, I want to flag for Dan and Drew, because they're great, and Ryan Height's great. I talk about them all the time. We don't need to beat that a live horse. It is almost impossible to download episodes from the 93.3 website. They have a podcast page. But if I want to go hear the morning crew with Dan and Drew, I can go to the podcast page and then click on the remote player, but I can't seem to download.
That's good.
And I want to link to some of their shows. They had Denny Hoskins on a couple weeks ago, and I really wanted to listen to it and link to it, but they make it almost impossible. Now, Brad, let's get back to China for 1 second. I'm going to pull a Brad Hildebrand and say that I have it on good authority. I heard what really happened between China and the state of Missouri. I'm surprised one of your sources, Cindy Cristofanelli, didn't tell you this, because she tells you a lot. Did you hear this, Brad?
No, go ahead.
She's got sources down in Southwest Missouri. And she heard that a Chinese delegation a couple years ago came to the United States. They were trying to meet with Missouri officials, and they did a sightseeing tour. And they went to Silver Dollar City, and they could not ride on the rides because they were too short. And they got back. They wanted to ride on Fire in the Hole, and they were too short. They had to go ride with the little kids on the steam train. And they got back, and they said, we're going to find the tallest people in Missouri state government, and we're going to sue them. And they looked at the roster. They looked at the biometrics, and it was Eric Schmitt and Catherine Hanaway. And that's why Catherine and Eric are bearing the brunt of this.
Oh, man. Okay.
Ancient Chinese secret. You like Fire in the Hole? We can't ride that. We got to ride Elephant Train.
Ancient Chinese secret.
Okay, we have to
Boop, 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 boop. Brad, you want to meet for lunch at Golden Apple? I know some of those guys look for a place to live.
You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
Okay, we have to take a break.